Hello, 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 boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I've still got the Unpaused soundtrack kicking on in the background there. I need to update that to some more contemporary music because Unpaused is in the past, unfortunately. It's sad to say. Hopefully, we'll be back next year. Welcome back to VUX World. I'm your host, Kane Sims, as always. And today we're going to have an epic conversation with Brian Cook, who is the CEO of WellSaid Labs. Now, for those of you who are VUX World fans, you will have probably recalled over the years, the last 6.5 years since we've been doing VUX World, that we've had a few conversations about synthetic voices. We've had a few conversations about voice generation, stuff like that. That's what WellSaid Labs does. And over the years, things have changed inevitably. And since the launch of ChatGPT in 2022 and the influx of interest in AI has begun to occur, there is a lot more, I say more, there's always been interest, but it seems as though there's new companies, for example, like 11 Labs and things like that, and OpenAI itself is creating synthetic voices, and there's this big resurgence now around synthetic voice generation. WellSaid Labs has been there since 2018, doing this since back in the day, and I'm interested to speak to Brian about not just where the technology is and what the use cases are and how things have advanced since we started talking about this in 2018, but also what are the ethics around this kind of voice cloning, if you like, because there's lots of people getting themselves into hot water recently, and I'll bring up a few examples of that as we get through the discussion, where voices are being stolen and used to create voices for digital assistants and other things. Without the voice actors actually knowing. And WellSaid Labs have got a very good approach to doing this ethically and properly. So I'd like you to welcome with me Brian Cook from WellSaid Labs. Brian, welcome to VUX World, my friend.
Hey, Kane, how you doing? Good morning or good afternoon it is, isn't it? Or is it Uncle Kane now?
Yes, very well spotted, yeah. It's Uncle Kane now, second time uncle actually, but this side, this time it's on my side, like blood-wise. So my sister had a baby yesterday night, and so yeah, I'm an uncle again. There you go, little Seren.
Fantastic.
Yeah, very nice.
Hello, everybody. Well, my name is Brian Cook. I'm the CEO of WellSaid. WellSaid is a leader in helping organizations create high-quality voiceovers using AI voice. So anywhere where you would see anybody using a voiceover, so marketing, advertising, training, ebooks, things like that, we would help them do that with AI voice. So in the business, we call it text-to-speech, generative AI.
Indeed, text-to-speech, yeah. And what you've got a lot of experience outside of WellSaid Labs. I'm looking through your LinkedIn there. You've got kind of like every position over the last sort of like decade or two has been founder, CEO, senior kind of positions. Talk us through a little bit about your kind of background and your experience and what led you to WellSaid Labs.
Sure. I've been around. I've started and exited probably 4 or 5 software companies. Mostly in the space of business process automation. That had me moving to America about 11 years ago. Probably the big one that people may know is a company called Nintex, or about helping people automate business process. But this is the first time I've run somebody else's company. So a bit of background on WellSaid. So 2 founders, a guy called Michael Petrachuk was working inside Paul Allen's AI2 Institute, and a bunch of geniuses inventing the future of the world. And he came up with really what was a breakthrough algorithm in creating AI voice in human parody speech. Along came his co-founder, Matt Hocking, who entrepreneur, background in advertising and marketing. And together they built this early product around speech to text, realistic speech to text. It took them a while to get going, but around the time of COVID, the business really took off. So, it has some 40,000 customers, half the Fortune 500, all across the world. I met the guys last year. I was looking for my next project, and I was just blown away by the space, the business, the energy, the potential. And so the guys asked me to run a business. So now I'm running someone else's business, which is very cool. Lots of fun.
That must be an interesting experience for you and for them, really, because they must have been obviously running it until now. and to get to the point where they decided that actually inevitably they've probably got other things that they think themselves kind of better at focusing on, type of thing. And so to bring somebody else in to run it is, one, shows great maturity, but it must be a bit kind of weird for both of you, both parties.
It is weird. I've been in their shoes before, hiring another CEO and putting them in place. So I guess I was able to help them go through that change. But it's very, Matt was very brave to step back and say, I think someone could take this to the next level. So it's been great. And on my part, it's liberating running someone else's business. You don't have the baggage of the past. You're able to be very objective, and I'm really enjoying it. It's great. Great company, great space.
Brilliant. And so what was it that interested you initially? You said it was very exciting. There's lots of potential, stuff like that. What are kind of, because you could have went to any company really. There's lots of companies that do similar kind of things. There's lots of companies that have synthetic voice generation in the AI space, in terms of not just generation but classification and understanding. There's loads of different technologies. So many startups coming out and stuff like that. What was it specifically about WellSaid Labs that you kind of thought, yeah, this is the place that I want to spend my time?
Yeah, I thought the founders are great. The tech was amazing and very, very different, very unique in their approach and how they go about it. And their stance towards ethics and responsible AI and how they think about that sort of resonated with me and how I was thinking about it. And I guess I got offered to run lots of big companies and things like that. And I really enjoy, companies going from that post startup to, larger company phase, global expansion. So it was great. And lived in Seattle. We were able to create an office and work face to face. So, a lot of things came together to in a great way to make this happen.
Nice. And so you've been there since January, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that time, you've kind of, obviously you may well have had an understanding beforehand, but obviously you've immersed yourself in this kind of space. You're aware of the other companies in there that I mentioned in the intro, like the 11 Labs and the Resembles and Reed Speakers and stuff like that do similar in terms of the practical application of that type of technology. Maybe their use cases are different or something like that, but what do you think? And then obviously, as I mentioned, you've got OpenAI, you've got Google, you've got all the big players that also create their own synthetic voices. Where do you see WellSaid Labs in and amongst that field? And what do you see in terms of, after you spent almost 9 months there now, what do you think is the difference between WellSaid Labs and some of the others on the market?
Yeah, it's a very different approach. So firstly, most of the other players on the market have some kind of open source capability, and they're using public information to source their voices and train their ML model, which is a great technique. It's very similar to how OpenAI and others work. WellSaid uses a closed approach, so they have their own model, their own technology, and all of their training data, or all of their voices, everything that they ingest, they know and own and have rights to. So we have relationships with voice actors. We record them in a studio. We pay them royalties. And so we know exactly what our ML engine has consumed and taken place. So if you're a larger corporation or organization that cares about not being sued, you don't want Scarlett Johansson turning up on your doorstep with a bunch of lawyers, they'll use WellSaid. They'll use WellSaid because they have the comfort in knowing that we have the right to everything that we use in the voices that we provide.
And that is a unique approach, because I mentioned when we spoke yesterday, and I'll ping up this for those that haven't seen it, which is this article from the BBC. Essentially, this fella here, it's called Paul Syke, and he is a voiceover artist. And he was doing some work essentially on Fiverr. Apparently, most of his work comes from Fiverr. He does things like voiceovers for animation videos and radio ads and things like that. And here's a quote from him, which I'll highlight here. "A tech company stole our voices, made AI clones of them, and sold them possibly hundreds of thousands of times." It's a company called Lovo. This is the firm that's done it. I'd never actually heard of Lovo before, but so there's a case there where this guy is being on Fiverr. He's trying to find, voiceover work. A random person who is not representing, or probably is representing, but it was like it was like an anonymous person was asking for the work. Had him do a load of work, loads of table reads, loads of video, voiceover work and stuff like that. He never heard anything after that, and everything he signed was to say that this stuff is all just for their internal research purposes. He's driving one day, and either an advert comes on or something comes on using a synthetic voice that sounded like him. And then he realised, actually, this company stole my voice and they've actually used it to then build a synthetic voice, and then they're charging out the usage of that to people that want to use it. And now he's filing a lawsuit and stuff like that. So, and then you mentioned there Scarlett Johansson. So it's happening. Things are happening where voice actors are being, misled, if you like, or hoodwinked, or having their IP stolen for the sake of creating these synthetic voices. So it's interesting that WellSaid Labs has this approach. What are your thoughts, firstly, on, why do you think that? I'm interested in getting more detail in terms of how you treat voice actors, but I'm also interested in why you think it's the case that companies like that do stuff like that. Do you think it's because they don't understand the value of the IP in a little bit in a way where, like people's personal data didn't used to be seen as being incredibly valuable until people realized that that's basically what Facebook built its entire business on. Now it's valuable. I'm just curious to understand like why you think that practice comes about in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about speed, and so they're trying to get to market very quickly. If I consume a whole lot of content, it'll mash together. No one will know. I really don't think that they think they're going to have a problem down the track. And we're seeing so much of this now. We're having customers come to us because they're in lawsuits and they're saying, we want to use your voices because of these type of things are happening. But I think it's about taking shortcuts. It's the WellSaid approach. The guys have been super disciplined about how they've gone about this. So, people will say, your competitors have thousands of voices. You only have a couple of hundred voices. What's going on there? And you say, well, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to identify people and license them and have a contractual agreement and then record them in a high quality format and go through all that process. It takes a lot to get it done. So we feel like that talent pool, those voices that we have, is probably one of the greatest assets that WellSaid has.
And how do you go about finding voice talent? Is it that you have a presence in that in that scene? Do you regularly advertise? Do people come to you? Do you go to them? Like how do you go about sourcing voice talent for voices?
Yeah, all the above. We have some people approach us. We had 3 new voices in the last week, which were actors that approached us and thought that, we'd be a great platform for them. We approached some of the actors, organizations and agents. And in places like Germany, we reach out to agencies in Germany to help us with getting German voices and so forth. So it comes about in multiple ways. Occasionally we've had, an employee who had a part-time actor sister that had an incredible voice. So we always like to see if we can keep it close to home, but there's a whole lot of ways that we get our voices. But the main thing is to make sure that we know who they are, we can prove who they are, and we're able to build a relationship with them. The other issue that happens is people impersonate. So they may go to a platform and provide a voice, but it's not actually their voice. So they're actually stealing somebody else's voice and then submitting it to somebody. So all of those things are it's quite a process to do properly.
Interesting. What do you think in terms of the impact of this technology on voice actors? Because I remember in 2018, ever since 2017, really, when I first started this podcast, intermittently over the years, I have voice actors contact me and kind of say, what's the impact of this technology on my profession type of thing? And I always say that if they're, rather than being afraid of it, because a lot of them think about it as this technology is getting really, really good, therefore I'm not going to be needed anymore. And I always used to recommend the best thing to do is to basically clone your voice and then sell it on, license it out. So when someone wants something done, you can just give them an API, they can access your voice, and then you can get paid for it. But up until I learned about WellSaid Labs, they'd have to, in order to do that, but especially in 2018 to 2020, they'd have to go to a company like Microsoft or Amazon or Google, and you couldn't, and nobody could just go ahead and do that. It wasn't as if you can just go to Azure and clone your voice. That back then, it was like a lot of money to do that. I remember Amazon were quoting hundreds of thousands of pounds to clone voices back in 2018, and so it's interesting to learn that that's what you do. Do you do you do that from the point of view of, if I'm a voice actor and I've got my voice IP cloned in WellSaid Labs, is it that WellSaid Labs then becomes the distributor, or is it also that I can also distribute my own voice via WellSaid Labs API and capture royalties like that?
Yeah, at the moment they're quite often not exclusive to WellSaid, so they could go somewhere else and do it. So we don't force that upon them. But I think we've approached it from the idea of how can you make this a mutually beneficial relationship between the voice actor and WellSaid. So the idea of, I would, if I was a voice actor, I'd obviously be concerned. And we wanted to set up a situation where they can literally make money in their sleep for the rest of their life. And so I think, there's an element of trust and, will you pay us, and is it going to be successful? And voice actors are very concerned about how their voices are used. You wouldn't want your voice turning up in some hate speech or something or some political thing that you don't agree with. So there's a whole process we go through around helping understand what they want to do and what they don't want to do, and making sure they're comfortable with how their voice is getting used. But at the same time, we're exploring new models, ways, the kind of things that you're talking about. How could a voice actor particularly use our API and then on sell it to other customers is something that we are exploring.
Yeah, it seems like a decent model. How do you go about calculating royalties and stuff like that? Then do you, is it a case of every time there's an API call to a particular person's voice, they have a percentage of the fees that you charge or something like that? Like how do you go about calculating that stuff?
Yeah, it's revenue shared. So if your voice is used more, you make some more money.
Right. So, but does that mean, so for example, do your clients then, the people that use WellSaid Labs, do they essentially have a license for the platform and pick and choose what they use, or do they have to pay based on consumption of certain voices?
Yeah, we hide all that from the customers. So as a customer, you just use the voices and let us worry about that. So basically, we have a share of our revenue that goes to voice actors, and in the back room, the finance people work out how to distribute that based on volume of use.
Right. So if I was wanting to use WellSaid Labs for my company to create content, how would I do that? Would I pay WellSaid Labs a flat fee per month to do it, or do I pay more the more I use?
Yeah, so we have two products. We have a API product, which is, consumption based. So if you are building a solution on top of our API, you would pay us according to consumption, and we sell that in blocks.
Mm-hmm.
The second product we have is a studio platform. So for those content creators creating voices, it's a platform that enables them to script the voices, edit them, modify how they sound. There's libraries to store and share voices. So that studio platform is something that people will purchase on a per user basis.
Oh, right. Okay. And then you'll do like a Spotify type of thing where all the revenue comes in, you then work out what voices are getting used most, and the revenue that then goes to the voice actors is split proportionally based on which ones are being used most, type of thing.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. So going back to the earlier question then that I kind of started asking and then veered from, what do you think the impact, if any, of this technology on the voice actor market is so far? And what do you think it will be in the future?
Yeah, I think obviously there's some nervousness, but it's a massive market. And we're seeing a lot of our customers are using voice where in the past they would not have used voice at all. So they wouldn't have been able to get a voice actor. They couldn't afford it, time, money, whatever. So I think where we are seeing the use of voiceovers more and more in more places, and in more medium that wouldn't have been used before. So, for example, training and development. Companies are constantly creating safety videos and things and so forth, and they wouldn't have used professional voice artists for that before. So I think, yeah, I think in the end, what goes into the pocket of the voice actors, we're comfortable that that's going to be maintained over time. It's just going to be done in a different way. They won't have to work as hard.
Yeah, well, technically they could only work once. If you've got a good voice, and if the trends keep going the way they're going, which is a rise in the quality of digital avatars and digital humans, and therefore the rise in the usage of digital avatars and digital humans, and then you look at things like gaming, non-player characters in games and stuff like that are becoming very popular, AI kind of generated, and so you've got lots and lots of different markets to play in, and you could feasibly be a voice actor that has a voice on WellSaid Labs. WellSaid Labs then distribute it to all of those different platforms for all those different use cases. And if the adoption continues to rise, your voice continues to get used. The potential for scale is far greater then than it is now, isn't it? Requiring people
Absolutely.
to record everything.
Just think you could like do a day's work and just be hanging back on the beach for the rest of your life, just being a good uncle.
I know. I think I might do that myself, actually. I've been thinking about it. How do I go about getting my voice cloned on WellSaid Labs?
There we go. Let's talk.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the principle. And so I think there's going to be a redistribution and it's going to be times where it's going to be challenging, but I think we're confident that that voice actors can earn a pretty good living doing this and be able to do a whole lot more things as well. The other part to our business, we have a custom voice business. So we have customers, particularly in areas like advertising, who have a voiceover artist that they like, personality that they like. So we'll do a recording of that artist, and that will be kept private for that customer, and they'll use that in for their advertising and things that they do. So the idea of a brand voice, where you have a voice, professional actor you record, they would have a relationship with that actor around royalty and what they get paid. And then that voice can be used anywhere in the world. Gaming, dynamic advertising is a really interesting space where advertisements are generated real time based on information about you. All of those areas are something that we see. So that our custom voice business is really taking off as well.
Yeah, but have you because back in, I don't know what year it was, maybe it's 2019 or so, when Amazon did a example of, I think it was Samuel L. Jackson, and they cloned his voice, they put it on all the Alexa devices, and then when you spoke to Alexa, you could have it in Samuel L. Jackson mode, and it will swear at you and all that kind of stuff. I thought that would be like the beginning of this big trend where all the celebrities get their voices cloned and then never have to do another advert in their lives. Have you had any experience working with any of those celebrities, and is that a trend, or is that just a one-off thing with Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah, we've tried to stay away from it. I think the business early on looked at this and saw that this is going to be end up in the kind of novelty, and we're worried about the impersonation space. Like, at what point does that become inappropriate, or people using an actor's voice and using it in a different way? And so the guys have really stayed away from that part of the market. But we do have customers who have said, I've got a personality, a well-known personality, and I'd like to record them and use them. So you may be hearing WellSaid in with famous voices right now. We just can't really talk about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there one of the things that not in the entertainment, I suppose it's related, one of the things that we used to talk about a lot in 2018 up until, I suppose, 2020, when things started focusing more on enterprise kind of AI use cases as opposed to more consumer. But at the time, it was kind of like the potential is that a brand would do exactly kind of as you're saying there, is that they would have, maybe they don't already have a voice, but they do want a brand voice, and therefore they recruit a voice actor themselves, create that voice themselves, but then use that everywhere. Marketing, sales videos, when you call the contact center, the IVR's talking to you in that voice, like everything is in that voice type of thing. Is that what you're referring to earlier? Have brands gone as far as putting that voice over absolutely everything, or have they just gone as far as replacing the current usage of voice actors?
It's very much heading in that way. We have customers now that we're working with to do exactly that. I wonder at what point you get sick of the same voice, but it's a pretty cool concept that,
Yeah.
everything from your alarm clock in the morning to answering the phone to what, everything is the same voice. It could get creepy over time, but yes. And also it's a way to have those brand voices used in ways that would be really difficult now. You know, hey, Kane, it looks like a really summery day today. Perhaps you'd like to take your kite out, Uncle Kane. Real time generating advertising based on knowing, that's something that a real actor could not do.
Yeah.
And so those use cases are really coming up as we see a lot of innovation happening in that space. We feel like marketing and advertising is where we're going to see a lot of uptick in innovation over the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. That's the limitation of the voice actor, is that to deal with any kind of variable information, you're going to have to re-record all the audio and you'll be there forever. If today's
Yes.
rainy and trying to record every single temperature, oh, hey, I know it's like 32 degrees in the valley or whatever. It's like, you'd never be able to record all the dialogue for it, or you'd be there forever.
I think that's that part of how the guys got started. I think Matt had a whole bunch of voiceovers that was a slight variant of all these things that were getting said, and that's how they started using AI voice to try and do that.
Yeah. Even, I don't know if this is possible or whether this is where it's going or whatever, but I'm thinking about how you change the tonality. For those that are familiar with this stuff, you might be familiar with SSML, speech synthesis markup language, which is where you would adjust how things are pronounced. So I always remember a time in 2019, I think it might have been, when we were working with Unilever, their Dove brand, and it was every time with Alexa it would pronounce it Dove. So you'd have to use a load of SSML so to make sure that every time you mentioned it, it would pronounce it as Dove, or not Dove like I say Dove, but like Dove or whatever. And so there's always ways in which you can change things with SSML. But now that we have generative AI and we have the ability to understand the context of language a bit better, it's potentially feasible, is it not, to then have a generative model read what's intended to be said, pick up on the tonality and sentiment given the context of the script and everything else around it, and then decide how that piece should be delivered rather than using SSML. Do you think that's feasible? Is that something you're thinking of, or are we?
Yeah, and that's without giving too much away. That's how we think about the future of text to speech. Being able to do a better job at understanding what you're trying to say and how you want to say it to whom, and doing that for you. So, for example, we started a relationship with Oxford Languages, who is a service that basically makes sure that you speak English properly. And
I could do with that.
and just really, me too. And so just integrating that and their technology into our platform so that we could make sure that, our pronunciation is spot on. And we have the ability for customers to go in and tweak things. If you want a word said a certain way, you can have it said a certain way. But I think over time, what we're trying to do is automate more and more of that so that you don't have to go in and tweak things.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because SSML is such a fiddly nightmare. Sometimes you'll be there forever just tweaking something to make it sound right, and then you've got to then duplicate that in all of the other places where that's mentioned. And also you're up against the limitations of the speech model itself. So if the voice is being recorded, like, let's say if I was recording my voice and I recorded it using this tone, because it's an interview conversation type of tone, then everything that comes out of it is going to have this tone. Now, if I wanted to use that same voice to do something a bit more exciting and extravagant on a marketing video, you're not going to be able to do that. And if you use SSML to try and do that, it just sounds terrible, So it's almost like do you do this where you'll have different versions of a model potentially with different types of tonalities and stuff like that? Because that could give you the precursor to being able to just switch in the right kind of model to be able to match the tonality that's needed based on the context of the script,
Yeah, absolutely. So we have actors do a performance based on a certain context. So we might say, read this script in a exciting advertising way, and hey, buy this,
Yeah.
and or read this as news, or read it as a very serious training video. And so we capture that in our training, and so customers can decide what type of voice that they want. And so I think there's an example on the front of the website to be able to have the same voice but have it talk in different ways. So that's really, really important. And it's super difficult to do that with SSML or script, or it's just a nightmare to try and do. So we try and figure out what are the major types of contexts where voice will be used and actually train. So with that in mind.
Nice. Should we have a listen?
Do it.
Should we do it? Yeah, let's try and do that, shall we? Let's ping it up. As if by magic, here's one I prepared earlier. We have the website. And so these are the different types of styles, are they, at the top?
Yes. Yeah, there are examples of styles that you can use with WellSaid.
Okay, so let's have a look at, let's try Terra. Cool name, Terra. Bit frightening, but cool. Using the training module.
Proper filing of TPS reports is an essential skill in an office environment. In this video, we'll learn how to access the reports and which signatures are needed.
Brilliant. Let's try that in a social media style.
Mealkits.com have totally saved my lunch. I get healthy, easy to prepare meals sent right to my home, and they're ready for me to take to work in just 15 minutes.
All right, support bot. Let's see what the difference is here.
I can see you have a question about your bill. Do you have your customer ID handy?
Okay, yeah, so you got the bill bit was pronounced a little bit differently, wasn't it? Finally, we'll do a podcast ad. If this is any good, I'll use this for our podcast.
Square Block is your go-to for creating campaigns that convert. Use the code SUMMER to get 20% off.
Nice. That's cool.
You're sold, aren't you?
Yeah,
I can tell that you're sold.
I'm sold, yeah. Especially if we can do my voice. If we can do my voice on this, I wouldn't ever need to do this podcast again. I'll just record all the questions and then
there you go.
create an avatar, and I'll be save myself a job.
And just get some LLM to create the content, and you're done.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. The future of podcasting is looking, what is it, in jeopardy?
Well, late last year, the guys did at NPR did an episode with just WellSaid voice.
Did they?
So that was interesting, and I dare you to try and find the episode. You cannot hear it.
Really?
So that was interesting.
They can't hear it. What? They took it down, or it's hidden?
No, as in it's really difficult to tell that it's an AI voice. In fact, you can't tell the difference.
Really?
And so that was interesting, and it's just an example of a use of the voices.
Right. NPR was that? Did that?
Yeah.
NPR.
I can find it. I'll dig it out and find it for you later.
Yeah. I'll put it in the show notes on the website. NPR. I can see it on the blog, on the NPR blog, on the WellSaid Labs blog actually. WellSaid Labs creates NPR's first AI podcast episode. There you go.
I'm an NPR fan, so that sold me. That's why I joined the company.
Oh, really? Is that what it was? That did it for you?
One of the factors.
Yeah, nice. I'll put that on there. Wicked. That sounds great. It's interesting having to deal with those different types of tonalities and stuff like that. What are you seeing as being the kind of, because obviously the tone that you use is obviously dependent on the use case that you want to apply it to. You covered a few different types of use cases. What are you seeing being the most kind of sought after voice type based on the most in-demand type of use case? Like, what are most people and most companies doing?
Yeah, I think the in the past it's been around training, safety, development. Basically, organizations trying to educate people within their greater organization about something. So it's that type of voice, but more and more it's about advertising for us, advertising and marketing. And so we learned very quickly that there are very different voices and very different approaches. And even within advertising, it gets much more granular about what type of advertising. Is it radio advertising, or what sort of media, and what's the context? So it's the more you dig, the more you learn.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. And so, I can imagine actually when we're talking there about dynamic ads, you're saying that you could potentially create an ad that's more personalized for people. You can also, in theory, you could also create more experimentation to find the right type of ad, the right script or the right voice or whatever. Like, there's a company, I forget the name now, they're based in England, and what they do is, if you want to run an ad campaign, let's say you wanted to do a Facebook display ad campaign or LinkedIn ad campaign or whatever, what they would do is they use AI, take your brief, and they'll generate like 300 different ads, and then they'll run them all. It's like a massive multivariate test, basically. They'll run them all, pick out the one that does the best, and then they'll double down on that one. In theory, you could do something similar with that, where you'd have lots of different ads, lots of different scripts, lots of different voices, and then you would observe which one gets the most click-throughs or whatever it might be, and then potentially you could use the same sort of theory to figure out what is the right specific voice for your campaign.
Yeah, it's definitely customers looking at that and looking at that approach, and because AI voice gives you scale, you could do it. A/B testing is not new, but ABCD 300 times is really difficult to do. So AI voice is great for that. We just did some things with we've got a new product explainer video, and one of the experiments of that, I think we did it in 10 different voices. And part of that test that's going on at the moment is to see what resonates best from a product video. And I think where early results find that different countries like different things. So that's interesting. So, for example, if you're dealing with WellSaid in the UK, you would get, an English voice, or in Australia, you get the Australian type voice. And so that's something that even internally we are experimenting and trying now.
That's interesting. Well, do you remember the voice that was created probably might have been 2022 or 2021 or whatever? It was called Q. Do you remember Q? It was kind of like the intention was it was supposed to be a gender neutral voice. Because at the time, it was kind of, Alexa was getting a little bit of slack because it's all female and you can't change the voice. And then Google went through this phase where it sort of stopped calling its voices based on names, and it started giving them colours to try and kind of move away from this is a man, this is a woman type of thing. Because there was like most of I don't know if this is true or not, but like the insinuation was that a lot of the voices that are being used for these kind of like digital assistants, which are people that just do what you tell them to do, are female. And then that kind of, the argument being that doesn't create the right kind of tone for society if everything that we're barking commands at is female. Have you had kind of any either thoughts from clients or any kind of, any thoughts around those gender neutral type voices? Because I'll be honest, the Q voice for me, I don't know if you've heard it or not, but for me it sounded pretty much male. So it's very difficult to do, isn't it? Because everyone who speaks does have a certain tone, and we're hardwired to pick up on what that tone is. And so I'm just curious about whether or not you've got any insight in terms of trends around preferences and stuff like that. Like, is that still a thing? Do people kind of care about it being male, female, or otherwise, or what?
Yeah, I felt the same way about Q. I didn't get it. But for us, diversity and inclusion in our voices is super important. So to making sure that we're representing everybody and able to provide, a diverse range of voices based on, culture, everything, is something that we keep trying to do and keep looking at. I wouldn't say that there's any particular trend in terms of voices. It's interesting that male-female's usage is about the same. There are definitely some voices that get used a lot more than others just because they're very high quality and suit the use case. But I wouldn't say it's heading in any particular direction. But as I say, we're always questioning ourselves, do we have the right type? Is everybody being represented on the WellSaid platform? That's kind of a very important thing for us to do.
Yeah, that's all you can do, really, I suppose, isn't it? How do you go about internationalization. You mentioned they're using the German agency for German languages. I'm assuming at this point you probably need different voice actors in different markets to create voices for those markets. Or is there technology available now that will allow you to take a model created in one language and have that applied to another language?
Yeah, the speedy way is to just consume things off the internet and use open source libraries, and away you go. But to do it really properly, high quality, in a way that it could be used in advertising, it's literally the same thing again. And so we do a whole lot of training particular to certain languages, and we train the voices based on the language that it's going to be used on. So it's quite difficult to do. It's easy to do quickly for a basic style voice, but it's hard to do very properly, if that makes sense.
So it's not necessarily feasible for me to say, right, I want to clone my voice and then I want to translate this podcast into every language using the same voice. So it's still me doing the podcast, still me doing the interviews, but I'm just speaking a different language. Is that too much to ask?
You can do it, and there's technology. We have competitors that will do that today. It's just the quality's not, and pronunciation's not going to be anywhere near what you're hearing now.
Yeah.
And so there are plenty of use cases where, well, that's fine. We just want to really get it out there. That doesn't matter. We've shied away from that part of the market and really said we want to be the best voices, the highest quality, the best recorder, the best pronunciation. That's super important to us and sort of core to the WellSaid value proposition. So we can do multiple voices, but the high quality stuff, we go to a market and we really go deep in how we go about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your thoughts on speech-to-speech technologies?
Yeah, we have customers that are doing it now because it's very, quite easy now to use an API or open source to take speech, turn it into text, and then use it as a way to generate script that's used in text to speech. So a lot of organizations are doing that now. We thought about, do we really want to have that as an interface for people to do that? Basically script a voice by talking. As we spoke to customers, we found that the typical process is they have plenty of tools to do that. So they can use whatever, Word or whatever, or to understand what they're saying and generate text. And then they would use that, manipulate that text and do whatever they need to do, and then put that into our engine to publish. It tends to be the way that it works, but it's not hard to do. It's pretty easy to do these days.
Yeah. Have you come across companies like is it Respeecher? Have you come across Respeecher? Where
a little bit.
Yeah, so they have, rather than text that you use to do text to speech, they have a model where essentially a voice actor would do their voice acting normally, talking to a mic, and then essentially what it would do is pretty much in real time, it would transpose that voice onto another voice. And so, but then that voice would keep the tonality. So if I was to go like this, or I was to go like that, then it would still keep all of the tonality and the delivery. It just changes the kind of voice, the sound of the voice, if you know what I'm saying. It's an interesting. They used it on the Disney, one of the Star Wars Disney kind of programs and stuff like that to do a Luke Skywalker voice. But it's an interesting concept where, because if you're a voice actor, the better you are, the better the outcome's going to be. And it means that one voice actor can play the part of 16 different people in an ad or in a movie or whatever it might be, all just by, still talking. But then, the speech-to-speech model kind of changes things. I don't know if that's something that, something that is of interest to WellSaid, or you think that the use cases you have and the clients you have is scripting is the predominant thing in future.
Yeah, it's tough. There's the biggest thing about this business and most early growth businesses, I like to make what we're not going to do lists.
Yeah.
So we make lists of all the things that we're not going to do, and this is on it.
Yeah.
We'd there's so many places we'd like to go, but we've had to really sharpen the spear and say, look, let's be best in the world at the part that we do and what we go after. And so it's an area that we keep an eye on and we think about. The whole how entertainment is done and movies and all the rest of it is obviously something that's exciting and would be fun. But we've sort of said let's just be really good at the part of the market that we do. But it is super interesting, the idea of being able to turn one voice into another is an interesting way to go about things.
Yeah, we had them on the podcast, Alex Serdiuk, who's the CEO, and at the beginning of the episode, they created a couple of different models, and ahead of the episode, I recorded the intro using the different voices. So you can check it out, actually. Everyone can check it out. I'll put the link in the show notes maybe, where basically it's me doing the introduction using like 4 different voices, which is quite cool. But I think having a list of things you're not going to do is perfect, because it is a totally different company with a totally different technology. They're really looking at not replacing, but enhancing film production through being able to, have voice actors play different roles. Whereas I think the marketing and advertising, the customer service kind of environments, it's all, you want to open that market up to as many people as possible. And those people are going to want to edit the text and change this and change that. So it's kind of like, I think that the text to speech is perfect for them use cases.
Yeah, look, I'm a frustrated musician from a very early age. So when someone can do this for my singing, I think that would be a great day.
Yeah. Auto-tune.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love the idea that somebody can take my voice and make it much more interesting and in tune.
Yeah, definitely. Same here. So what's the impact then of kind of generative AI and large language models on WellSaid Labs? I kind of alluded earlier to a potential use case that sounds as though you might be looking at, which is taking the context of the script and then adjusting the tone to match that as you go, rather than having to deal with SSML or manually changing models and stuff like that. What impact has generative AI or large language models had, if any, for WellSaid Labs? And does it change things? Does it give you new capabilities? Is it just a kind of flash in the pan and a big load of hype? Or how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think like every other organization, the marketing department loves it. So it's great for helping creatively. I love the idea of using, say, ChatGPT as a sounding board or to come up with some ideas. So there's that part of it and how we use it in our tools and daily work, which we love. As far as LLM and speech to text, we're looking at the kind of scenarios that you're talking about. So how can we use LLMs to help the scripting process and to make it much easier for customers to create great voiceovers. So we hear customers say, we love the technology, we love the voice, but what do we know about writing a script or being able to do that? So that's one of the areas that we are innovating on to try and work that out. At the same time, we're very disciplined about our ML model and so forth. So we want to make sure that we maintain this idea that everything that we're trained on, everything that we're consumed is all data that we control and use. So we need to make sure that as we use these LLMs, that's separate from the model that we use around our voice.
Yeah, 100%. I think you've got a really exciting potential there, because in theory you could fine tune an open source model, and it only needs to be a small language model because you're only doing one very specific thing, and you could fine tune that on all of the best performing ad scripts. Take I don't know, obviously you've got access to loads of them on the platform. I don't know if you've got data in the platform which is kind of like, here's all the ads that have been created using our voices that have done really, really well, but presumably there's some way of getting hold of some data which would be all of the scripts from all of the really great, highly engaging ads. Take that, fine tune an open source model, and then you can surface that in the WellSaid Labs studio, so that when someone's creating an ad, they can say, I'm creating an ad for insurance, and it needs to be, they can give you the instruction or whatever. But then because you've got a fine-tuned model behind the scenes, they can segment, here's all the high-performing insurance ads, here's all the high-performing sports ads or whatever, then generate them a script based on their requirements that's being fine-tuned on all the scripts that you know work really, really well. So you could potentially enhance the, time to value basically for people.
Yeah, there's huge potential there. Initially it's about getting the scripting much easier and automating as much as possible. But as we think about our technology platform, we're thinking about how do we make that process of scripting easier, faster, more effective? And then, as you say, how can we use AI and learning models to adjust that based on performance? So it's definitely the future. And how we're thinking about it. Have you been coming to our R&D meetings? I'm a little bit concerned about this.
No, but I get excited about this kind of stuff. So sometimes your imagination runs with you, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've ended up in some crazy places. I love the idea of, okay, it's 20 years time. Where are we at? And what does it look like? And then let's work backwards and see how we get there. And it's such an exciting space, and there's so much potential there.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, in the WellSaid Labs studio, do you actually write scripts in? Do people write scripts in there, or is it kind of like, is it a creative studio where you from beginning to end design everything in there, or do people just copy and paste stuff in there that they've done elsewhere?
All of the above. We have some customers that use, that has an editor, then they just begin inside the platform. Others I think a lot of customers will generally create a script and content and then post that into the platform.
Yeah.
And then generate the voices from there. But as we talked about, we're looking always about how can we make that process quicker and easier for customers moving forward.
Yeah. And what's the output they get from the platform? Is it kind of like do they download the audio that they then go on somewhere else and finish the assets they're creating? Is that what happens?
Yeah, they'll download the audio and do something with it. We maintain it, so if they need to go back and do things and so forth, they can do that. So typically they'll take that audio, and if it's just audio thereafter, then they're done. Or they will merge that with some type of visual content. They'll put it into a Adobe Premiere or put into Canva or something like that. We have integration into Canva and Adobe to make that process easier. The advertising world lives on Adobe. So that's making that process simple is something that we're always trying to do.
I was literally, as we were mentioning Adobe, I was thinking, exit plans, Adobe and Canva. That sounds like a good route, because ideally what you want is in Adobe, you want to just be able to create your script in Adobe. Because if you're creating your video in After Effects or whatever, whack it into Adobe, do your editing, write your script, get your voiceover, and all that kind of stuff, So if you could find a way of either integrating or selling to Adobe, then then there'll be a nice little workflow. That
you're giving the game away. Yeah, it's interesting that the advertising just lives in the Adobe world. So we're always trying to find ways to do that better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it sounds fantastic. I think I'm always keen to see where this technology is, and those voices we listened to earlier sound really, really good. And as you said, the use cases are endless. Basically, the advertising and marketing departments are definitely kind of got the finger on the pulse of AI these days, and they're really keen on generative AI, large language models, synthetic voices, stuff like that. But then that's just one area. You've got all these other areas where voices are used. So the market's huge. So it sounds like it's a good time to be at WellSaid Labs.
It's a great time to be at WellSaid. Great time to be alive.
Isn't it? Yeah. And this is the worst it'll ever be, hopefully. That's what they say about large language models, isn't it? This is the worst it'll ever be. But having said that, it might be the best I'll ever get, because who knows, the data they're trained on, where they're going to get more data from, all that kind of stuff. Like, who knows? But good time to be here.
Yeah. As I think we were talking about before, like it is interesting that these large language models are running out of data. They've consumed the whole world's content, and they're still not able to do things that an 8-year-old can do. There's something about efficiency there, and So I think that I think that we're going to have to see some breakthroughs in that approach over time.
I agree. I saw something today on LinkedIn, which was like this big hockey stick chart showing where ChatGPT started, where it is now, and where it will be in 5 years. And that's entirely based on the assumption that somehow they'll find more data, whether it's through YouTube or podcasts or whatever. They'll find more data, they'll build bigger models, and inevitably things will just continue to get exponentially more clever. And I don't actually know whether that's the case. I don't believe necessarily that that's true. I don't I don't believe that bigger always means like better necessarily. And I don't necessarily think that the improvements of the model are on an exponential curve, because it's already really, really good. For it to get twice as good as this is going to take a huge leap, I think, in the foundational infrastructure of how these models are built in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's the issue of these models start consuming each other's output.
Yeah.
And it all just turns to rubbish.
That is a significant risk. Yeah.
We were talking about everybody's LinkedIn profile introduction is exactly the same.
Yeah, it is. I was saying to you as well the other day that you can spot something that's been written by ChatGPT because it's a little bit like, do you know who's the guy who used to do all of the movie trailers? Can you remember the guy? In a World. Do you remember that guy? In a World. Yeah, that's him. Yeah. You got it nailed. So that guy, ChatGPT always starts off things in the same style as that guy does that narration, which is something like in the fast-moving digital world or in the fast-paced landscape in the economy. It always starts with something very similar to that. So whenever I see that now, I'm like, that's fucking ChatGPT, that. Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of wondered whether there's an opportunity in saying, let's get the second and third best answer to every question. Because if all the large language models are producing the most probable, the best answer, then they're all going to be the same. So what's the second best one look like? So interesting to think about. But yeah, there's also the issue of, power consumption and what it takes to generate these models now. I think we're due for a breakthrough on this technology. I think we need a new way of doing it.
Yeah. There's some interesting companies out there doing some good work. iGo, for example, has a very different approach to all this kind of stuff. And Peter Voss, the CEO and founder there, is very vocal about how large language models are not actually the precursor to artificial general intelligence. And, there's lots of people out there like Jan LeCun from Meta and stuff like that who are just adamant that this is the wrong path, Gary Marcus and stuff. I think for me, it's all about, is it good enough to do what you need it to do? And for a lot of the stuff, especially the stuff that we work a lot in customer experience, customer service and stuff like that. It's good enough to do 99% of what it needs to do in that environment already. And same thing for advertising, no one will generate a script or an article or a blog or a LinkedIn bio or whatever it might be, and then just post it. Everyone wants to review it anyway. You have to review it. You have to look at it. You have to make sure it's doing the thing you want it to do. And 9 times out of 10, you need to revise it and edit it. But when we do it for the podcast, we'll take this transcript from this podcast, we'll throw it into a large language model, we'll have it generate an article that'll summarize this conversation we're having, and we'll post that on LinkedIn. But that won't be it. All that will do is it will get us 500 to 700 words that encapsulates the essence of the conversation. Then we've got to go through it, change it, edit it, make sure it actually is a true reflection of the conversation and all the main points are in there, type of thing. So I think that it's good enough now to be useful. It doesn't have to lend itself to artificial general intelligence, I don't think. That's someone else's problem, really. I think all we can do is use it for what it's good at now, and if it gets better, it gets better. But if it whatever happens, happens. But it's good enough for lots of things today,
Yeah, I think the next few years at Gen AI is about us, stop creating more foundation technology. Let us build the solutions and applications and real things on top of it that are useful to people. And so that's what I think we're seeing now. It's interesting, the AGI thing. So we achieve AGI, then what? What do you do with it? Gets interesting. So, but it's at the same time, who knows? As you say, the exciting thing about this industry at the moment is you could wake up in the morning and something groundbreaking. You find something groundbreaking every day.
Yeah. The other thing about AGI is that everyone wants artificial generative intelligence because they're saying that will be the time when computers are as clever as a human. But it's like, what human?
Yeah.
Because some of them are pretty fucking stupid. Anyway. Brian, this has been... Go on.
Shoot. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Oh, good. Fair enough. Nice one, Brian. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been a very, very enlightening conversation. I'm glad to, glad to see where things are going and where things have got to. You know, as I said, it's been a while since we've done a conversation specifically around text to speech. I think that, we've seen the voices, heard the voices. They sound really compelling. And I especially like the approach to being ethical about how you source the voices, how you protect people's IP, and also how you give back to voice actors. That's definitely something that is unique to all the other companies that I've seen. Some of them, do use open source data to train models. I do know of a few of them who do genuinely use voice actors and create half decent voices, but I've never come across ones that are so kind of culturally adamant about making sure that the voice actors are almost partners, and you compensate them and you reward them and you bring them along the journey. I think that's a really great philosophy, and hopefully it all pays off, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Great to spend time with you.
Likewise. And thank you all for listening. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure as always. We'll be back again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. See you again. Bye now.